So, introduction. So, Ollie Phillips, ex-England rugby player, England Sevens and coach and mountaineer. You've played rugby games on the top of mountains. You've done a huge amount of work for charity, and you're now working as a director for PwC, and you're running your own consultancy. Like, what more is there to say? And you've got two amazing children and a beautiful wife. Is there anything more that I need to add to your repertoire than that?
No, you do not, Zoe. That is true. Although the last point is the best point. My two little kids and my wife. So that's the best of the lot. But that is the CV, if you like, the previous CV.
Amazing. And the reason that I'm talking to you today is because I think there's a real clear link between high performance and the sporting world and then the corporate world, and the corporate world has got a lot to learn. And I used to be I am a massive rugby player, and as you know, when we first met, I was more interested in having you sign my rugby shirt than having the business meeting. So I think there's a huge amount of value in what you've done in your life and how we can then help corporate leaders get the best out of their teams. So I'm just going to ask you a few questions about that, and we'll just have a chit chat about
Can't wait. Look forward to it.
Corporate life. So I'm really interested. This is my favourite question. So how do you define, when you were back in the rugby days, how did you define performance? How did you all agree on what performance meant?
I mean, it's such an issue because, if I'm honest, it varied from club to club and it varied from coach to coach that we had within each environment. So I remember some of the best coaches that I was with, they would define performance ultimately as making progression irrespective of the end result. So if we won or lost, it was about the performance. Were we continually progressing towards ultimately our end goal, which was to be a world-class rugby team? And there were obviously key differentials or key points that would sort of articulate that well, and that we could work towards certain standards that we had to hit that would sort of identify that we were making progress, or that we were going to be hitting the world-class performance levels. Yeah. And some of them, I guess, whether you want to call it the most open-minded, the most forward-thinking coaches were those that linked performance to that metric, rather than lots of coaches that I work with in lots of teams where it was all about the W. Right. So it kind of, performance almost didn't matter as long as you won. And in sport, there is some relevance around that, because obviously it's a cutthroat industry, it's a cutthroat business, and if you're performing well every week but you lose and you get relegated at the end of the year, it doesn't really work. So there needs to be the combination between the two. So, and for me, I was more of a believer in that we need to keep progressing as a team, and performance was all about how do we make sure that each individual within the 23 or the 44, 23 that were picked on the weekend, or the 44 that were in the squad, were constantly maximising their own personal potential. And if they were, then that would obviously contribute. The sum of all the individual parts was therefore going to be an incredible whole that we would then go on, and the result would ultimately take care of itself. Yeah. But I was also, I guess, kind of addicted to winning. I wanted to win at all costs. So, and certainly in my earlier years, when I was probably not as mature, I was centered more around that, rather than actually understanding the importance of performance. And I think if you come at it with that mindset of progression the whole time, you start to actually nurture people's talent, and probably surprise yourself with actually some of the abilities that people have, because you have that ability to remain open-minded and start to push people to achieve their full potential. Whereas if it's all about winning, you basically pick a squad that you think will do that all the time, and that limits you. That limits you in terms of your ability and your ultimately the capabilities that your team, or the levels that your team can go to.
Got it. I hadn't thought about it. You used the words cutthroat. Being a spectator of it, I'd never considered the fact that it is quite cutthroat, isn't it? Because you've got that table, and it's just so visible, and it's so easily measured. It's just, you can't hide, you just can't hide at all. Your performance is just there.
Yes. Not. So in other places around the world, so all the leagues that I played in, whether it was England or France, there was promotion and relegation, which obviously adds, from a commercial perspective, a spectator perspective, a much greater interest. It's much more interesting if there's something going on at the top and something going on at the bottom, and then there's lots to play for. It keeps the season engaging.
Yeah.
But if you look overseas, if you look to like New Zealand, South Africa, Australia, ultimately they play a much better brand of rugby, and ultimately their national teams are more competitive. You know, New Zealand have been the best side in the world for a long, long time. South Africa are current world champions, etc., etc. Their league structure is no relegation. So as a result of that, you know, if you like, that shines a light much more onto performance. I guess all the positive aspects of performance, like free flowing attack, taking chances, taking risks. I guess being encouraged to fail more, but because you're trying things. And there's still an importance of winning, but it's all about how do we express ourselves and become a much more capable rugby team, and equally athlete. Whereas, you know, I would say, I mean, you just have to look at the contrast in terms of styles. The Northern Hemisphere sides, they've got much better, but because I think of the league structures and the way they ultimately are always geared towards safety, if you like, play the percentages game. And as a result of that, I think it reflects in some of their play. You know, we've got the combination, because in England it's relegation, in Ireland, Scotland, Wales, it's ring fence, so you know, you don't get relegated. So, and there are pros and cons to both.
So, God, that's fascinating, isn't it? So you said before, you said you're a bit addicted to the what's the question I'm going to ask? You mentioned you were addicted to winning, but you were also concerned about individual self-actualization as well. So you were like, okay, I'm interested in the individual parts that make up the whole, but at the same time, I've really got this competitive edge. Where did you get that mindset from? Were you born with it, or did it develop over time? Where did that come from?
Yeah, I think, you know, I think it, you know, I think the dynamic is now changing in society. But, you know, mine came from basically from the ages of 4, playing for whoever I was playing for. You know, it didn't matter really, whatever competition I was playing, and the objective was always to win.
Wow.
You know, so not. I mean, I'm just trying to think. Throughout all my adolescence and whatever, there were not many. This isn't a criticism of the coaches or the parents, whatever else, but there weren't many people that were focusing on performance, developing and nurturing talent, even though they kind of were, because that, you know, they were in that coaching environment. But that wasn't their modus operandi. A lot of them were about, you know, the W, like, and if we won, it was euphoria. If we lost, it was, you know, disappointment and devastation.
Yeah.
You know, as opposed to it being about whether we won or whether we lost, it didn't really matter. You know, as a kid, Ollie, wasn't that amazing? You did like 5 passes off your right hand and off your left hand. Like, that's amazing, blah, blah, blah. So focusing on like skill development, talent development. So I think for me, it was probably just ingrained in me coming through.
Yeah.
And then once you get to school, and I mean, other things come into the world, i.e., you know, well, everything else that comes through, you know, developing your alpha self. So girls, 100%, you know.
Big distraction.
Well, no, but it's a massive. Everyone wants to be a winner, if that makes sense. Girls don't come up to the end and go, "Oh, great! What, you know, lovely performance." You know, it's about winning, losing.
Very polite girls that you hung out with in your adolescence. Oh, lovely performance.
That's what I mean. None of them did. That's what I'm saying. So it was just all about whether you won or whether you lost. You know, so and I think most people are geared towards that. You know, it's lots of people look at outcome. You know, outcome first, win or lose, then performance. I think some of the best coaches in the world in football, the likes of Jurgen Klopp, Pep Guardiola, they recognise the importance and the commercial aspects of winning, the importance to the team and the psychology of the team in terms of creating momentum and the positivity that winning breeds, you know, the vibe that it breeds in your culture and everything else like that. Yeah. But they place performance at the very, very forefront. You know, that's what I see anyway. All the way they talk, the interviews they give, the training that they do, it's all around ultimately executing the perfect performance, not the perfect victory, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because if you can deliver perfect performance, you've won the game anyway. It doesn't matter.
It's natural.
Yeah.
And that's really interesting. how did you get over failure? So in such a competitive mindset, everyone's like looking for the big W. How do you deal with failure?
I was really rubbish at it at the beginning.
We,
Definitely. Yeah, probably one of my least proud moments in hindsight and reflection was when I was captain for England, and we went to a World Cup in Dubai. We were ranked number one side in the world. We watched basically all the top other four nations crash out before us in the quarterfinals. So we saw Fiji go, we saw South Africa go, we saw New Zealand all crash out, and we were playing Samoa in the quarterfinal. Which we should have walked as a game. We ended up losing that game in extra time, and we watched. No disrespect to Wales, but at that point in time, they were a total sort of pub team, piss up artists, there for a good time. We watched them go all the way to the final of the World Cup and win it, and they were ranked. I can't even think. They were, ranked 12th or something, or 13th in the world at that point in time. And my reaction to my teammates after losing was, I just, now on reflection and knowing the things I know and I don't know, the things I've read, it was just so rubbish. Like, I mean, I guess it was almost, I mean, I blame myself, but a bit of blame culture as well. I came in there and was like, we've let ourselves down, you've let your family down, you've let blah blah blah. Just basically this outpouring of emotion, which realistically was not relevant, not helpful. So in terms of like, how do I deal with it? Back then, badly, because I think I was desperate to win, and I just loved the euphoria of winning and that feeling of ultimately being the best. And then I think when I retired, it was not during my career. My rugby career definitely was focused on that. And now post my career, having gone and done the Clip Around the World race and a few other bits and pieces, definitely with them, that is where my focus has become much less on winning and all about development. I just appreciating what people are doing it for, like their rationale, like why do people move, what gets them out of bed at night, why are they doing certain challenges, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
I'm much more interested now in that, I guess, the performance side of it, rather than do you win or do you lose at the end of it. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm very competitive, but it's become much less of a priority for me than it was.
So tell me about those experiences. What was it about those experiences that shifted you from focusing on the winning?
I think it was because the environment that I was in was so unfamiliar to me. Like, it was, I had never sailed before.
Right.
So ultimately, I'd never been up Mount Everest before. I'd never been to the North Pole before. So basically, I had no knowledge. I had no credibility around that. So I had nothing to, if you asked me about rugby, I was like, well, hold on, I'm England, whatever you want to call it, all the bravado. Like, I'm an England rugby captain. I'm voted the best player in the world. I know my onions. So you kind of went in there almost with a bit of an ego into those scenarios in terms of best. Whereas, sailing around the world or going up Mount Everest, whatever, I was totally out of my comfort zone. So I had no prior knowledge of what I was encountering. So I was totally reliant on those around me who were more knowledgeable to provide great guidance and whatever else at that. So that, I think, it grounded me more, if you like, because I was coming at it from an amateur perspective, needing to learn the ropes, if that makes sense, as opposed to being, if you like, a credible individual within that space. So as a result, my approach needed to change, and I recognized that pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And then I tried to bring my skill sets to it, which were physically strong, physically fit, all the rest of that sort of stuff. So how can I be beneficial, helpful to the group, to the team, and everything else like that?
Love it. I love that you use the word ego, because one of my objectives with my coaching company is to help CEOs and executives learn to leave their ego at the door, because the ego is what drives that competitive, almost kind of red urgent energy, which we need a lot of the time, because it can drive performance in certain ways, but it can also suppress people's innovation. It can suppress their creativity. It can mean that they're less heart-led and more head-led. And I love that you said, actually, when I went on these expeditions, it sounds like your ego ultimately had to kind of stay at the bottom of the mountain, and you had to just learn all over again, learn afresh how to be part of a team.
Yeah, I mean, 100% was, that was an element of it. I think there was a huge self-awareness piece that I went through, in my personal life and whatever else that helped me, I guess, appreciate that. I mean, particularly PwC, when I went in there, again, same scenario. Like, I didn't know anything. I was much less credible in terms of the subject matter.
Right.
So but it was being, I had to become incredibly, I guess, self-aware, emotionally, I guess, of my tells that I would have when I was, I don't know, behaving in a certain way or being slightly ignorant or whatever it might be, to recognize what for me, I've got a mantra, a belief, whatever, that feelings drive emotions, emotions drive behavior. So I was always conscious of, like, I wasn't, but going through the self-awareness piece, okay, how am I feeling today? What emotions is that then eliciting me? So if I'm feeling pretty flat, I'm going to be relatively downbeat, miserable, whatever else. And so as a result of that, I'm probably not going to make the best decisions, behavior-wise, be a miserable git, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, the more and more time I invested into understanding that, the better I became at managing that.
How would you describe your leadership style now, based on that shift?
Before, my original leadership style would have been much more, I don't know the word, but let's say dictatorial, of like, okay. And I think it was driven by the fact of, when I was with England or whatever else, everyone was same sex, same marital status, same age or similar age, everyone roughly in their 20s.
Yeah.
So, and then you had this carrot of playing for your club or playing for England or whatever else it might be, that you dangle in front of people. And that, I think maybe because everyone's like-minded, that seemed to sort of solve anything. So you'd be like, run through that brick wall, or we need to do another rep. And they wouldn't even ask the question as to why, they just do it,
Yeah.
So realistically, leadership and whatever else from that perspective was pretty straightforward now in hindsight. When I went onto the boat, that was probably the biggest sort of baptism of fire, because that made me realize that the Clip Around the World race, anybody between 18 and whatever age can do it. So I walked onto a boat that nobody was a professional sailor. No one had been a professional sportsman. I was 30 at the time. Our oldest crew member was 76. Our youngest crew member was 20. And just so our oldest one, Jill, she was a violinist in the London Philharmonic Orchestra. She wanted to do one last thing before she died. She wanted a life experience, right? So she didn't care. I mean, I begged her not to have that life experience on board the boat, but I did it. But she came. She didn't care. Well, she might have cared about winning, but it was like fourth or fifth in her priority list, right? And then contrast that with another lad, Tom, who came away with us, who was 20, didn't really know what he wanted to do, was thinking about going to university, was probably in between. It was sort of his gap year, but realistically, all he wanted to do was fall asleep, back of the boat. So if you just look at that as an example, you've got like me, who was coming into we've got to win, everything we do has got to be geared towards winning at all costs. And then on a 28-day crossing from London to Rio de Janeiro, people be going, well, why? What does that matter? Like, who cares?
Wow.
Or in the middle of a massive storm that's blowing the boat over, and you're asking somebody to go up the front of the boat when the waves are smashing over, and because to go and rescue a sail, and they're like, well, why? Like, why do I want to do that? I could stay here in the boat, be safe, not risk getting injured, as opposed to like going up the front of the boat to pick up a sail that's washing overboard, all within the rationale of like winning. Just it just didn't. It just made me realize pretty fast of like, okay, Ollie, whilst my priorities might have been that, my focus areas might have been that, I needed to very, very quickly understand what made people move on the boat and why they had come on the boat.
Right.
So what their reasons for doing the race were, why they were, effectively getting out of their bunks every day, why they paid their money to be there, etc., etc. And then the quicker that I could hone into that and understand that, and then effectively feed that appetite, feed that need, feed that cause, if you like, from their perspective, the more responsive they'd be towards me, the more trust they'd have in me, the more thanks they'd have towards me. And so therefore, the more likely they were to be, to ultimately help me towards my goal. So my goal was, winning at all costs. If I said, look, let's go and get that sale up front, if they trusted me and liked me and everything else, because I'd help them achieve their goals and ambitions, they might do it. B, if I could then link it towards their goals and ambitions, even better. So like, I don't know, Jill, come up the front with me because like this is the life experience you've been wanting. We'll do it. We'll be safe. I've got you, blah, blah, blah. She trusted me. I've suddenly got a pair of hands that's willing to do something that maybe before, under the guise of like, we've got to win, they wouldn't do. They weren't interested in that. And so as a result of that, that really broadened my horizons and my perspective on actually it's not about winning. It's about delivering value to the individual and delivering on ultimately their ambition and their goal and their talent, if that makes sense. And that in return will help me towards my goal, whatever that is.
That is so powerful. Like, we should send everybody in the world on a boat with random people.
Yeah. But I mean, it was kind of the same on all of them. I mean, just on all the, I mean, that's what these sort of extreme adventures are great for, because obviously they put you into very uncomfortable scenarios and situations. And yeah, I mean, obviously it's always great to get the medal at the end of it that says you won it, but it's not. Yeah, I mean, if I'm honest, it kind of, on all of those scenarios, I never felt either super elated when we got the medal or super disappointed when we didn't.
Yeah.
It kind of didn't matter, if that makes sense, because I don't know, if you like, the performance, the experience far outweighed the shiny piece of paper at the end of it all. And that was definitely my sort of, or that has been my learning and leadership journey, if you like, all the way through.
Great. So then you decided to join the corporate world, which I think is brave and bold and stepping outside your comfort zone again, because when we've spoken about,
or desperate because I just needed a job, one or the other.
Come on.
Yes. But let's go with your one. I prefer your version.
We spoke about it recently and I was like, what was it like? And you said, well, I just didn't know what I was doing again. I just had to start all over again. And that people avoid that for their whole lives, right? They want certainty, they want to stay safe.
Yeah. I totally agree. And that was, well, it was and is definitely the hardest thing I've done or am doing, because in all those other scenarios, I had some tangible form of credibility in all those environments, like whether it was sailing, cycling, going up to the North Pole, and that was that physically and mentally I was strong. So on board the boat, I couldn't tell you, sail trims and whatever else, I wouldn't know. But if somebody said, look, lug that sail from point A to point B, I was arguably, one of the strongest or most capable of doing that. So therefore I had value immediately. There was value. Whilst they knew I didn't know how to sail, I could add value from that perspective. Same going up Everest, same going cycling across America. I was always physically in the ballpark. Well, whereas in PwC, the physical side counts for nothing, absolutely zero. If nobody cares if I run up and down the stairs 25 times quicker than anyone else, or tackle more people at the photocopier than anyone else. So in PwC, particularly obviously in an industry and in a sector which is very specialized, predominantly whatever it is, tax, assurance, not always, but very numerical, facts are facts, and balance sheets, accounts, etc. I've always and continue to struggle with that side of it, because I'm always, I don't know, 20 steps back from where everyone else is. One, because I don't know, they've done their ACAs and they're fully qualified, or they've been in the industry. I'm a director, so most directors have been there minimum 12 years of experience. And if you like, they've worked at the coalface all the way through. They've done their fitness training, for want of a better description, for 12 years, dotting I's, crossing T's. I have and did circumvent all of that, which was a blessing from whatever you want to call it, like credibility, title perspective, but just very challenging from I'm sitting on calls as a director. There's an expectation from a client of I don't know, maybe for me to have core based knowledge around whatever the subject area might be, VAT, I don't know, make it up, right? And to never have that is always like, it's a massive, whatever, personal struggle, if you like. And lots of people say, no, don't worry about it, because you bring so many other things, and it's your leadership and your management and the people and whatever else. But it's just a very foreign environment for me all the time. Like sitting in any meeting, if you like, within Everest or whatever else, tea, was sailing, whatever, I would have some form of contribution or credibility in the arena, that I could say, we need to lift this, or we need to carry that, we need to walk this much further, we need to cycle this much longer, I don't know, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And equally knowing the implications of that, because physically I would gauge and had experience of how hard or how easy you need to push yourself.
Yeah.
Whereas within PwC, I've just got no barometer. I've got no gauge of, of any of that. So I always find that very, very challenging in my sector all the time, around, okay, well, Jesus Christ. And how do I get comfortable at being uncomfortable is the classic analogy. And we used to have that when we were with England, our training, whatever else, was geared towards getting comfortably uncomfortable. And it's so pertinent and relevant to how I feel within PwC all the time, just because I guess no one's ever said it, but there's always just a level of expectancy or whatever, that you kind of know this stuff, and it's so broad and so varied. I don't know all the stuff, and when you come from an environment whereby you knew all the stuff, you knew your industry inside and out, and you were a specialist in your industry. I was a winger, but you knew your job and what you had to do for your job, and then you could kind of call, excuse my French, you could call bullshit on anyone else's job, because you knew roughly what the parameters of good and bad look like. I find it very difficult to manage through I don't know what good or bad looks like in a scenario. I can't really call bullshit on this. I don't know if I should really contribute here, because I don't know if this is right, if this is the right sort of comment, blah, blah, blah. But so, I mean, they're the emotions, if you like, the feelings that I go through. So to our point, like, feelings drive emotions, emotions drive behavior. Now, I'll be feeling, I don't know what I'm talking about here, or feeling a bit insecure, if you like, around certain things. So then that will breed insecurity, anxiety, the emotions of that, or the behaviors of that for me would then be, I just won't say anything. Which is a negative thing, obviously, right? Whereas in an Everest scenario, I'd be like, God, I'm feeling knackered here. As a result of that, I'm a bit crabby. My behavior will be, I understand all that, so guys, we need to stop. As an example, right? I'll voice up. Whereas, it's very different. I mean, getting better at it, obviously, but it's very different in a PwC environment, because of just the nature and the complexity of the beast.
Yeah. And what you're describing is emotional intelligence. So it's that self-awareness, understanding that our emotions and feelings are driving our behavior, and then being able to choose rather than have the emotions and feelings choose for us. You can pause.
Yeah.
Okay, I know, I recognize I'm feeling anxious, but you could choose in that moment to say something, couldn't you? You could choose to just say whatever you think is appropriate.
And then it fundamentally then comes back round to, we spoke at the beginning around how do leaders guide performance or promote, that then comes down once that individual goes to that emotion, so that feeling and then that emotion, the ultimate behavioral decision will be driven by the environment that the leader or the team or whatever has created. So if you have an environment, a safe environment, if you want to call it that, whereby, you know, the individual feels like it doesn't matter if I speak up here and say, look, I don't have a bloody clue what anybody's talking about, then that is great. You know, then you've got a cracking environment whereby people can admit their failings and whatever else like that, and they can learn really, really quickly, and you can share knowledge and you can share experience. And don't get me wrong, there is that within PwC. There is also the pressure that comes onto an organization like PwC, which is the number, you know, depends where you look at it, right? But number one, number two in the world in terms of professional services and advice. And we provide a service and advice to clients. So therefore, there is an expectancy that you know the answer. So as a result of that, that comes a pressure around that is, okay, shit, I can't necessarily say here or ask this maybe dumb question, or I feel is a dumb question, because shit, it might, you know, it might expose us to, you know, that we don't know the answer, or I might make the team look bad because, you know, I'm a representative of our team, and in front of a client or whatever else, I'm saying, sorry, what the hell's that all about?
Yeah.
So it's, you know, but that's not necessarily the organization. That's just the nature of the beast, if you like. You know, the environment, the brand, the perception in the market. It's the market response to stuff.
Well,
because yeah.
It's also it's a corporate thing as well. Like from all the corporations that I've worked in, there's a real fear of not knowing and making yourself look foolish or making yourself look incompetent. And one of the things that I learned really quickly in my audit career was not knowing can be a really powerful thing. And we underestimate how powerful not knowing and saying we don't know is. And people don't value it on the surface, but if you actually, I started showing up in audits and saying, right, I know absolutely nothing about what you do. I'm not going to claim to know anything about what you do, and that's why it's awesome that I'm here, because I'm going to ask you all the questions and you're going to give me answers that I don't understand, and then I'm going to ask more questions because I don't understand what you've told me again, and then we'll get to the root cause of what's going on. So not knowing can be really powerful, but we just don't value it in that way. We don't use it as a tool in that sense.
Yeah, of course. But as I say, that comes back round to, you know, what's the biggest inhibitor of performance, and that's obviously fear and anxiety. You know, those are the main areas of, okay, you know, why didn't you do that, or why didn't you say something? Well, I was sort of scared of the outcome. You know, so, you know, going ultimately, you know, they have the feeling, that feeling drives this emotion of fear, anxiety, whatever you want to call it. If, you know, we're talking negative connotations here, because it swings both ways. You know, positive, there are positive actions too. But in those scenarios where the individual feels anxious or fearful, the result is often that they don't say anything.
Yeah.
You know, they don't say anything. They just sort of either bury their heads or hope it goes away. And the end result of that is obviously, you know, disastrous, you know, or negative as an output. And, you know, the way you overcome that is, yes, okay, the individual needs to take that leap and speak up, but they're not going to do that. They will point blank, not unless they're unbelievably strong character that doesn't really care about their job or their place in the team or whatever else like that. They're never going to do that unless there is a support infrastructure around them from the leadership, from the group, whatever else, whatever you want to call it, from the team, that sort of says, kind of like, we're all in this together. If you don't know, ask me. No question's a dumb question, blah, blah, blah. And it's, loads of people say that, right? Loads of people, I've heard that 50,000 times in meetings. So it's kind of irrelevant saying it. It's living and breathing it that's the important thing.
Yeah.
You know, actually delivering on that statement is the more relevant and pertinent thing, rather than just, you know, writing it down. Anyone could say it, you know, speak up, tell me what you want, and somebody speaks up and goes, how the hell have you not known that? What a dumbass. Like, and then the reaction is, okay, we won't use that person anymore.
Yeah.
Even worse, because then you just reinforce. Then that person's like, why the hell did I speak up in the first place? You know, I've been sacked, or I've been demoted, or I've moved off the team, whatever.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, it actually exasperates the problem even more, right? Because they've stuck their head out the parapet once, they've been shot. I ain't doing it again.
Yeah, totally. And then they create that story with other team members or other people, and then culturally it becomes, yeah.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is that I think that the ultimate decision is driven by the individual who has to speak up.
Yes.
But that's the end. That is the last piece of the jigsaw puzzle. It has to be totally fueled, supported, structured by the organisation.
Yes.
Prior to that, so that ultimately those reactions, those decisions, those behaviours are acceptable, if you like, are expected.
Amazing message to end on. So thanks, Ollie. So you're at PwC, but you've also got other things going on. Do you want to tell us about what you're up to and how people can find out more?
Yeah, it'd be great. Well, obviously, if they want to get in contact with me regarding any PwC bits and too, that would be awesome. But yeah, the usual LinkedIn. I'm all over there. So Ollie Phillips on LinkedIn. My social handles are all at Ollie Phillips 11, whether that's a Instagram or Twitter or whatever else like that. And then if they're interested in hearing more about my stories or my, I guess, perspectives on leadership, performance, whatever else, the company I've got now is called Optimist Performance. So just jump on the website, have a look, give me some feedback. It'd be great. I mean, as I always say, life's about stories, creating stories, sharing stories. So my way is never the right way. So I'd love to hear from other people as to what, their perspectives and their insights.
Amazing. Thank you.